Okay, hi everybody. Well, okay, we're going to try something here. I've never done a video quite like this before. Hopefully, it's entertaining to you and it all goes well. And if not, whether it's a success or a failure, it's one or the other for a good cause. Because once again, all of your super chats, those of you who are feeling generous and want to contribute super chats during this stream, they will all be going directly to charity. Once again, the charity is the Bail Project, which is helping to pay legal fees and bail out protesters who have been arrested all across the United States recently. So if you want to contribute to that and you haven't done so already, please feel free to do so. We've had a couple of contributions already before the show even started, and I just want to note, as I did on Monday night when I was raising money at the face during the Facepalm 5 for this same cause, this particular fundraiser was not started by me. It was started by my fellow YouTuber Tyler Regan. But I also wanted to raise money for the Bail Project, and Tyler had already set up a fundraiser for that. And I figured, why divide our efforts? It all goes to the same beneficiary anyway. So I am asking you to contribute to that fundraiser that Tyler started for the Bail Project, and you can contribute via super chat in the live chat if you're watching this live, or if you're watching this later after the live stream is over. There is a donate button in the donation box below the video on your YouTube page, so please consider donating to the Bail Project. And also in the description, there's also a link to Black Lives Matter DC's legal fund GoFundMe, which you can also support if you want. If you don't want to support the Bail Project, or if you have already supported them and you are still feeling generous and you want to support something else, Black Lives Matter DC also is raising money. I encourage you to contribute to that cause as well, if you are able and if you are of a mind. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you how I make one of my Star Trek parody photo action figure comics. And I saw a question already from Jemshin in the live chat, who says, in the vein of a Let's Draw, is this going to be a Let's Diorama where we see the scenes and cameras set up and everything? Unfortunately, no. Anonymous just donated to the Bell Project, so thank you very much. And so did Mark Gummerson. Thank you very much, Mark, for donating. I'll try to, if I can keep an eye on the live chat while I'm doing this, and I can try to call people out and give them a shout out after they donate as it happens. I will. If I miss somebody, I'll go back occasionally and see if there's anybody that I missed. But yeah, so I'm not going to show you the actual camera setup and the actual photographing of the action figures. I'm going to show you how I take the pictures after they've already been photographed and put them together into the comic. But that process is, I'm gonna talk you through the whole process. So first, a little bit of history. I have making funny Star Trek comics has been a part of my Star Trek fandom for a long time. Before I ever started doing these action figure comics, which I only started doing a few months ago. But before I did them, for years, I would do comics where I would make them out of screen grabs from Star Trek, the original series. And if any of you have ever read John Byrne's comic book series, Star Trek New Visions, where he takes screen captures from Star Trek, the original series, and manipulates them and makes them into new stories, photoshops them, and it does a lot of really amazing things with them. It's what I was doing was not anywhere near that good or that elaborate, but it was the same kind of deal, only I was doing it to be a smartass and to be funny. So I've been making Star Trek comics, funny, like parody Star Trek comics, for a very long time. And just recently, Alexandra Alert just donated, or Alerte just donated to the Bail Project. So thank you, Alexandra. So I started making the action figure comics relatively recently, and the process is pretty straightforward. I take a Star Trek action figure, and I use these 9-inch Playmates action figures that were popular in the 90s mostly, and maybe a little tiny bit into the early 2000s. And I put them in front of backgrounds. I put up a Star Trek background on my computer monitor, and get an image of like the bridge or 10 forward or wherever the setting is, and I arrange the action figures, the dolls, if you will, in front of the background in whatever arrangement they need to be, and I photograph them with my camera, my Canon 70D, which is the camera that I use to record all of my videos. Not this one, obviously, because I'm using my webcam, but for most of my videos, I record the video with my camera 70D, and I also take the still photos that comprise these comics with the Canon. And then once those are all taken, I take them off of the camera, and then the process of assembling it begins. But before and by the way, PJ Husinger donated to the Bell Project. Thank you very much, PJ. Before I even get to the photographing part, the scripts, yeah, Skyscanner says in the live chat, the dolls are way bigger than I thought they were. Yeah, they're a 9-inch scale. Before I even get to the point where I am taking the pictures, the comics are scripted. I actually script them ahead of time like a proper comic book. Those old photo comics I made back in the day when I was just assembling screenshots, usually they were not scripted ahead of time. I would start with kind of a general idea or like a joke I wanted to do, and then I would kind of put them together and put the dialogue together on the fly. And I found it was a lot easier with these action figure comics to script them ahead of time. So I'll show you what one of the scripts looks like. It's pretty straightforward. There, I just script them in Notepad, just very basically. And this is the script that I'm going to be going by for this comic I'm going to put together for you on the live stream. And it is episode 41 of the series. By the way, the series is titled Star Trek Nemesis, because a lot of the humor comes from conflict between the characters on the ship. So this is episode 41 of Star Trek Nemesis, my parody comic series, and it is titled "Fuck Boys Don't Cry," and that is a tribute to my friend Leto Anor, who always, whenever Commander Riker comes up in conversation and she is around, she always makes sure to remind me that Riker is a fuckboy. So I titled this and wrote this in her honor, and it is about Commander Riker. Most of the comics center on Commander Riker. He is sort of the star of the strip. I have done a few and will continue to do some where Riker is not in them, just to change things up. But for the most part, Riker is the star. And according to Leto Anor, Riker is a fuckboy. So in this comic book, we will explore Riker's fuckboyness. And it's called Fuckboys Don't Cry. So I script it, and I write it one panel at a time. I write down what the arrangement of the characters will be. I write the dialogue, and then when I get the script finished, we get to the assembly, and assembling the comic is pretty straightforward, I would have to say. I have my script always open for me, and I just go to the directory where I keep all the pictures, and I find the one that I want to use for panel 1, which will be a picture of Worf, Geordi, Picard, Riker, and Troy on the bridge of the Enterprise, on the Enterprise E, because this comic is set at some point after the events of the movie Star Trek Nemesis. And what has happened in the world of my comic is actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Hang on, let me do this real quick, and then I'm talking and I'm getting ahead of myself. So anyway, the Star Trek comic is set post Nemesis, and what has happened in the continuity of the comic is Commander Riker was, of course, promoted to captain at the end of Star Trek Nemesis, and he and Counselor Troy moved to the USS Titan for Riker to take command of the USS Titan. And in my comic, what happened was, shortly after he took command of the USS Titan, he crashed it. And as a punishment, he was demoted back to commander from captain, and he was reassigned to the Enterprise E. And what has happened since my comic started is he has been demoted yet again. He is now no longer even the first officer of the Enterprise E. He is the Enterprise E's strategic operations officer, and Worf is now the first officer underneath Captain Picard on the Enterprise E. And also, Counselor Troy has resigned from Starfleet, and is still on the ship and is still married to Riker and is still a counselor, but now she is a counselor in private practice. She no longer is a member of Starfleet. And that was necessary because the Counselor Troy action figure that I got does not have Counselor Troy in a Starfleet uniform. She's wearing civilian clothes because it's Troy's action figure from, I think, Star Trek First Contact, when she's dressed in civilian clothes most of the time. So to explain why my action figure is dressed in civilian clothes instead of a Starfleet uniform, Troy is practicing in private practice. So before I even get to adding the pictures in, I need to do my page layout. That's why I say I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So I'll show you how I do my page layout here. Let me see why my live chat viewer is not... showing the chat. There we go. I had to authorize it. Yeah, so anyway, let me show you what I mean by doing the page layout. So I start with and I do all the photo manipulation in a program called GIMP, which I think a lot of you probably know. It's an open source, free image editing software. It's sort of a less powerful and much less expensive version of Photoshop, and it is perfectly suitable for all of my needs. And I start by opening a GIMP project file, and I make it 1920 by 1080 and black background. And then what I do is I make a copy of that background layer, and I fill it with this blue color that I use as the border of my panels. And then I just keep making copies of this panel and resizing it. And the only constant in terms of panel size for the comics is that I try to make them no more than 3 rows of panels, because I want everything to be one page, to be one image. I don't want to do multiple page comics. The format of this comic is I want it to be just a single image. So I try to have no more than 3 rows of panels, because then if I've done 4 a couple of times and it's worked okay, but if you get much smaller than that, it's tough to read. So each row is a panel height of 360, and then the panel width depends on how many panels are in that row and what all is happening. So for that, I have to go back and consult my script. So I know that row 1, actually, I don't think I broke these down into rows yet, but I'll just sort of wing it. I think row 1 will be 4 panels. I think the whole script is probably 12 panels. So if I do 4 panels per row, that should be okay. So I want to do 4 panels for row 1, and the first panel has 5 characters in it, so that's going to be a relatively wide panel so that I can accommodate all those people and have room for all of them and all of the text and stuff. And then the panel after that will be 2 characters, then 1 character, then 3 characters. So let's try this. Let's make panel 1 about 650. And then I'll duplicate it. And then what I usually do so I can tell the panels apart is after I duplicate it, I invert the color so that it's separate from the other one. And I can put them side by side and tell where one panel starts and where the other one stops. And move that over. And then this is panel 2. It has 2 characters. It'll be Riker and Troy. So I'll make it a little narrower. Maybe make it, let's say 500. We'll try that. And we can adjust these if it turns out that they're not, that it doesn't quite work out. And then I think panel 3 is just 1 character, which is Picard. So narrow that down to... Now see, I'm running into a little bit of a problem here because I think, yeah, panel 4 is 3 characters. So I'm going to need to shrink some of these. So let's take panel 1 and knock it down to maybe... Yeah, let's try 600 or thereabouts. And then panel 2, we'll move it over here. Let's make it like 450. And then panel 3. Panel 3 we can probably keep about 300, and then give us a nice wide panel 4. There we go. And so that's the first row sort of blocked out, and then I do that for the next 2 rows. So we'll start with panel 5. Since I didn't mark it in the script, I'll go ahead and mark this as the beginning of row 2, and then I'll just say panel 9 is the beginning of row 3. And row 2 is a shot of, it's a 2-shot, or it's a shot of Riker and Troy, but it's a shot of Riker sort of over Troy's shoulder. So I don't need quite as much space as I would for a typical 2-shot. So I'll make it a little bit wider than that single character panel that I have in the first row. And this next one, panel 6, is going to be another wide one because again, it's all 5 characters. And I think I'll just make it as wide as the first panel. Well, let me check how wide the first panel is. The first panel is 600, so I will make this panel 600. And we'll see how that works. Or roughly 600. And also, it's important when you're doing the page layout, and this is part of why I do this as a separate step instead of just throwing the pictures in here willy-nilly, is I like to have a page layout where the panels are staggered. It's sort of like building bricks on a wall. You don't want to have the bricks all lined up straight on top of each other. You want the gutters to not to go straight down. I mean, you can if there's a reason for that. You can do a really straight page layout like that, but I like to have them staggered a little bit. It just makes it more visually interesting. And I've found when you're doing a comic book or a web comic where the action is action figures just standing around talking to each other, you do whatever little things you can to make things more visually interesting. So the next panel after this is another over-the-shoulder shot, so I'm just going to duplicate the first over-the-shoulder shot panel from here and move it over. And then for the fourth panel, it's another 2-shot, but there's a lot of dialogue, so I want to have some room for it. So I think that'll actually be pretty good. It'll give me enough, hopefully it'll give me enough space to put in the dialogue without having to make the text too terribly small. There we go. Actually, I should have inverted the colors on these a little bit differently so that I could tell them apart. But as long as I have a line there that I can tell where the rows end, I'll be all right. I'll show you what I'm going to do about that in a minute. But first, row 3. That is another 2-shot. So let me try this one. I'm going to make it a little narrower. Maybe we'll make it, we'll try 440 there. Because there's not a lot of dialogue in that panel. And then this next one is also a 2-shot. So I'll duplicate and invert, drag it over. And this panel is also a setting change. At this point in the story, the setting changes from the bridge to 10 forward. So I'm going to make this panel a little wider, and hopefully I won't live to regret that. Because the next panel is going to be a 1-shot, I believe, yeah. And then the last one is a 3-shot, so let me duplicate this and drag it over here and make this 3-shot panel first. Make it about like that. Let's make it 600. And then this bit in the middle will be the third panel of that row, and that is a 1-shot panel, just one character in that, and a little bit of dialogue, so I want to leave some room. All right, so that, very, very roughly speaking, is sort of me just blocking out the page layout. And then the next step is I flatten this image, which means it takes all those layers and just smushes them down into a single layer. I duplicate it. I take the bottom one of those and I fill it black because that'll be my background again. And then for the top one, I add an alpha channel, which makes it transparent if you crop it or cut things out of it. I do a select all. I shrink the selection by 20 pixels and I crop to selection. That gives me a nice border on the outside. And then I zoom in about, I guess 100% will be all right. And I take my rectangular selection tool and I select out a gutter of 20 pixels and center it there on that divide between the rows. And I stretch it all the way to either side and do a Control X, and there's the barrier or the border between rows 1 and 2, and then I just drag it down to the next row and do it again, and there's the gutter between rows 2 and 3. And then I just do the same process in between all of the other panels in the rows. And that's how I have my nice, neat, orderly gutters in between my panels. And GIMP is very easy to use. You can just drag your selection from place to place and hit Control X and it will cut it out. There you go. And then I hit a select none and let me fit the image to the window. So that is my page layout for the comic. And I don't leave it like this. What I do is I do a threshold to make it all white. I add a new layer on top, go back down to my panel layer here, and I select all of the white using the color select tool. Then click back up to my new layer that I just placed over it. I go from selection to path, so the selection, all the boxes become paths, then do a select none, and then make sure that my foreground color is that blue color, and I do a stroke path. And I have found through experimentation that 4 pixels for the line width is a pretty good color, so that's how I get the borders for my panels. I found visually I like it if I have this blue border around the panels. I just think that looks good for this particular comic. And then one last thing I do at this stage before I start adding the actual images in is I always end every comic with a reference to the line that was the on-screen title at the end of Star Trek 2 and I think Star Trek 3 as well. At the end of those movies, a title comes up before the credits after the final fade out, and it says, and the human adventure continues. And I thought it would be funny if I ended every one of my comics with, instead of saying the end, I ended with, and the human adventure continues. So I always put that at the bottom of the last panel. And the human adventure continues, ... And then I boldface it. And the font I'm using, that I've been using for this comic, is called Comic Chuck, which is a pretty good comic lettering font. A lot of people sort of naturally assume that any comic lettering font is Comic Sans, the notoriously terrible font, and that is not the case. There are actually some really, really cool fonts that mimic comic panel hand lettering, and I have a bunch of them, and this one, Comic Chuck, is the one that I have been using for the most part for my Star Trek comics, and I think it works really well. So I'm going to move that up on top. I'm going to add another blank layer behind it because I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. I have my and the human adventure continues in place now. I'm going to select the blue and then select that layer that I just put underneath it, and I'm going to border the selection by 2 pixels and then fill it black, and that gives me a little outline. I'm going to merge those layers down, so now I have my text with a black outline, and then I'm going to add a drop shadow to it. And I think I have it, I've done it recently, so I can, yeah, there it is. There. And then I merge that down into my layer with the panels, so that's all in one piece. Do a fit image again, and then I don't need the white boxes anymore, so I can get rid of those. And now I have a nice, neat page layout, and I'm ready to start adding my images. But first, before I do that, let me check back in with the live chat and see how all of you are are doing, because I've been neglecting you while I've been doing that. Let me see about any donations that I have missed here. A bunch of anonymous ones. Thank you to all the anonymous donors who have donated since I started going through the page layout process. I really, really appreciate that. And I noted how much the fundraiser had, what the fundraiser was at when we started the live stream. So I'll be able to say like how much was raised during the show. Oh, there's Kevin Logan in the chat. Hi there, Kevin. Okay, so now I am at the point where I am ready to start actually putting the images into the comic. I got ahead of myself a minute ago, but now let me show you what that looks like. So go back to GIMP, go open my image folder. Now we can do this. Now I drag the photograph for the first image in. I like to drag them underneath the layer with the panel frames so I can sort of visualize where they belong. And also I need to reset that so I'm scaling in proportion. And then I just start scaling my images to fit the panels where they're going to go. And I can see, because they're behind the frame, I can see where they're what they're going to look like. Let me zoom in here. Zoom into about 200. There we go. And I can see how that's going to look. And I can leave myself some space up above for the for the dialogue. And this image is a little overexposed, so I'm going to go ahead and adjust the levels a little bit and turn it down so it's not quite as bright. So it matches the others a little closer. And I'll probably have to adjust those a little bit later on as well. But just for now, I think that's in the ballpark. And then I select in accordance with the panel frame and I crop it, and there's your first panel. Zoom back out. Panel 2 is Riker and Troy. So I find my Riker and Troy picture, and also what are Riker and Troy doing? Okay, they're arguing. So I think I want this one here. And I scale it down. Center it in the panel where I want it to go. There we go. It's like I imagine, for those of you in the live chat who are paying attention to this, I imagine it's like watching an episode of Joy of Painting if Bob Ross did not have any talent whatsoever, and was just putting stuff together without actually doing any painting. Hopefully, it's about a tenth, at least a tenth, as entertaining as it. So panel 3 will be a one shot of Captain Picard, and I know exactly which one that is. It's this one. Drag it in, scale it down. Picard is usually the straight man. He is usually the one who has to sort of witheringly take Riker's abuse and put up with his incompetence in the strip. Although I do occasionally give him some goofier moments, but mostly Picard is the straight man. He's the one who is sort of forced to tolerate Commander Riker's shenanigans. And a few of the other characters' shenanigans as well. There are some other characters that are a little wacky. It's not just Commander Riker. Panel 4 is Picard, Riker, and Troy. And that would be... Let me see. I think this one is the one that I want to use because the lighting is better and it's the same pose as this one. So I didn't actually know I was going to be doing this. I mean, I have wanted to do a stream like this where I did sort of an assembly of my photo comics for a while, but I didn't actually know I was going to do this today until about 2 hours ago. I just sort of up and decided. And I wanted to do, I have these comics written out so far in advance. This is episode 41. I have scripted out to, I think, episode 56. And I have photographed up through episode 46 that I just haven't put together yet. But for this one, I wanted to do one that was written and shot just for this live stream. So I actually wrote the script to this one. I've had the idea for this one for a while, but I actually wrote the script for it this morning and photographed it and everything. So some of the shots I didn't use the exact same lighting setup that I usually use. I didn't have two lights on, a light on either side, and so some of the lighting is a little uneven, but it's not so bad that I can't make it work. I think it'll work just fine. Might have to adjust the white balance a little bit on panel 1 because it looks a little off from the rest of them. But anyway, so there's the first row placed. Row 2 is this shot of Riker over Troy's shoulder, and that's right here. Scale that down to the proper size. I love shooting these panels with my Canon 70D because when you shoot with a proper camera, with a or a camera with a proper lens, you can get such awesome shallow depth of field shots. So you get these really dramatic, like cinematic looking shots of action figures, of dolls talking to each other, which I find so incongruous and hilarious. It's one of the things that I personally, as the author, think is really funny, is that there are these like really composed, dramatic shots of action figures talking to each other. I do something similar from time to time with Steve and Stuffy as well, and I get a kick out of it. I just think, sometimes I'll be setting up a shot for a Steve and Stuffy shot, like with just the animals, and I'm going through pains of like composing this really dramatic looking shot, and I have this moment of clarity where I think like, what am I doing? But I think it's all worth it. Next panel is another panel of all five of them. And I think that is going to be this one. Yeah. Okay. And I think I'll need to brighten that one up a bit. It's a little dark. There, that's more. That's a little closer to how the rest of it looks. And then this next one is another dramatic over-the-shoulder shot. This one is of Troy over Riker's shoulder. There we go. And try to frame it so that it is roughly sort of a mirror image of this one over here. Crop it. And then also I noticed that Deanna's face is not quite as in focus as I would like. It's a little more out of focus than some of the other ones. Not a lot, but just a little tiny bit. I'm gonna go back through once I get everything in place and focus it all at once to sharpen it up a little. But I can sharpen this one a bit on its own with the Unsharp Mask tool. I just turn the radius down to something very small, like about 0.5, and then just nudge the amount up until she looks as focused as I think she needs to be. So I don't want to focus it too much, but I want to get it more focused than it was. So that should be fine for now. And then the last panel in this row is another one of Riker and Troy together, and they're having an argument. I think it's this one right here. Yeah, see there. That's another fun challenge with doing action figure comics is their facial expressions are always the same. So when you want to indicate particular emotions, you need to rely on body language. So when Riker's arms are up like this, he's usually excited or pissed off about something, and you can see Deanna has her arm up, sort of like she's trying to explain something to him. Good luck with that. Let me check and see how much dialogue I have in here. I think this is a pretty dialogue-heavy panel. Yeah, so I'll move it down so I have more room up top. But I found it's a lot easier to place dialogue in the panels if you give yourself a lot of headroom. So that's why I try to place the character sort of low in the frame as much as I can without it looking visually distracting. Because it's just a lot easier to place the dialogue in the panels without having to cover them up too much. Although you still have to do that sometimes, and I'll show you how I try to get around that as much as possible. And that's row 2, and now row 3. And this is the final shot of us on the bridge. It's a shot of Captain Picard and Commander Riker together in a 2-shot. This is another one that's a little dark that I'm going to have to lighten up a bit. Scale it down. Move it over. And I think I can actually make that one a little smaller, give him a little bit more room in the panel. Let's try to center them roughly here. Crop it, and let me brighten it up a bit. How does that look? I'm gonna have to adjust them because I noticed some of them are a little dark, some of them are a little brighter than the rest, so I'll have to make some adjustments, and also some white balance adjustments need to be made. But after I get everything placed, I'll worry about that. Okay, so now we do the final 3 panels are in a different setting with different characters because the scene shifts. So we go from this group on the bridge of the Enterprise E to, and this will take some explaining, Commander Riker and Captain Kirk in 10 Forward. One of the other divergences of my comic continuity from mainline Star Trek continuity is I did a story relatively early on in the run where Commander Riker takes a vacation, and when he comes back to the Enterprise after his vacation, he has along with him Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock from classic Star Trek. And the explanation for that is that while Commander Riker was on vacation, he ran into the Nexus, and while he was in the Nexus, he traveled back in time to classic Star Trek era, and he made transporter duplicates of Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock in their classic Trek era versions, and one set of transporter duplicates stayed behind in the 23rd century and continued to live their lives as Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock had in history, and the other 2 came forward in time through the Nexus with Commander Riker, and now they live on the Enterprise E along with the rest of the TNG crew. So that's why Captain Kirk is there. And Kirk and Riker are kind of sort of buddies. I think I've tried to imply that they're kind of pals. So Riker is having some trouble, and he goes to 10 Forward to confide in Captain Kirk. And this next panel is a Kirk single panel. Size that down and move that over here to the extreme side, because I think this is another panel that has a decent amount of dialogue. I want to make sure I have enough room for all of that. Yeah, he's got to say all that. I think that's enough room for all that. I think that'll be okay. There we go. And then the last panel is of a 3-shot of Riker and Kirk, and also Geordi, who comes back at the end for the punchline. So that goes in the last panel slot. And this panel also has, I think, a fairly large amount of dialogue, so I want to give them plenty of space for that. The most difficult part of writing these, and believe it or not, sometimes the scripts for these really goofy, frivolous Star Trek parody comics, the scripts sometimes will go through multiple drafts. And usually the multiple drafts are because I've written it with too many panels and I want to shrink the number of panels so that I can have a less cluttered page. And then also the panels, there's just way too much dialogue. And I need to pare down the dialogue while still being able to get the jokes in that I want to get in and get the point across. So now all the pictures, all of the images are there on the page. This is roughly what the page will look like. Now I'm going to go back through and make some adjustments to sort of make sure that everything looks more or less the same. For instance, color temperature is a problem. There's a lot of inconsistency among the color temperatures, so I think I need to warm this panel up a little bit. I think I might also need to change the hue a little bit, so I go to the hue and saturation tool and play with that a little. It doesn't need a lot, but just a little bit, so it's in the ballpark with the others. I think that's close enough. And then this Riker one here. Which one is that? That one. Needs some color temperature adjustment as well, I think. Yeah, that's a little better. He looked a little on the cool side. And then this one down here. Actually, I think I can go back and mess with that top one a little bit more too. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think I might just do this one over again. I feel like I screwed this one up. I think, let me see here. There's this one. Yeah. Let me try that one. 6529. I'll brighten this up with the level tool. And curves a little bit. And I think that looks a lot better. Yeah, I think that's a much better match for the rest of the panels. Okay. And now what I do is I don't want to flatten image again because that'll take out all the layers. So I just merge down each panel until all of the individual panels are in a single layer. And that makes it a lot easier to manipulate them all at once, because I think in terms of color it looks pretty good, but I do like to sharpen them a bit. Let me save this. I do like to sharpen them a little before I move on to the next step. So go to unsharp mask, do the same thing I did before. I take the radius down to about 0.5, and then let me zoom in to 100%. Then I just sort of move the slider until it looks sharp enough to me. It's all eyeballing it. It's very subjective. I like to get it to the point where I can just sort of see the fibers in the uniforms of the action figures in the close-ups. And you can also toggle preview on and off so you can see what a difference it makes. There it is, how it's going to look, how it looks now, and there's how it'll look with the sharpening. So it does make a big difference. It makes it a much clearer image. I like that. Okay, we'll save that. I'm going to add an extra layer because that's where I'm going to go with the text now. I'm going to take my blue color and change that to white. Before I go any further, let me see how everybody is doing in the live chat. Oh, I see in the live chat, Veos is asking, where does he get the background from? The backgrounds are sort of cobbled together from different sources. Some of them they're not actual sets. They're still shots taken from episodes or from like 3D reconstructions that people have done of Star Trek environments. And the way I get the background is I take the image that's going to be the background, like an image of the bridge, let's say, if the scene takes place on the bridge of the Enterprise, and I put it up on my computer monitor. And then I arrange the action figures in front of the computer monitor, and then I photograph it all at once. So it's the action figures photographed in front of a two-dimensional background that represents the setting that the scene takes place in. It's actually a pretty cool process. It's and sometimes you can tell in certain shots, you can see like the pixelation of the monitor, depending on the angle or how close or far away I am with the camera. And I don't usually mind that. I don't usually try to fix that too much because I don't try to hide or pretend that it's anything other than what it is. Like it's a comic made from action figures. So, But yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a lot of fun, and hopefully you all are enjoying. Hey, Joe McClory's here. Hi, Joe. Hopefully you all are enjoying watching this. Let me see. Oh, I see. I missed Dustin Pinney contributing to the fundraiser. Thank you, Dustin, and also another anonymous contribution. Thank you, anonymous, as well. Thanks to everybody for contributing. Just a reminder: this is a fundraiser. I don't know how long this is going to go. I'm going to do this until I finish this particular comic. So anytime between now and then, if you're watching and you feel like contributing to help the Bail Project, which you can contribute to directly through the live stream, please do so. Also, you can also contribute to the Black Lives Matter DC Legal Fund, which is linked in the description of the video. And I can't keep track of that as well. as I can with keeping track of the donations that are made through the Super Chat to the Bail Project. But if for whatever reason you don't want to contribute to the Bail Project, but you would like to contribute to the Black Lives Matter Legal Fund, you can do that and contribute to the GoFundMe through that link in the description. And also linked in the description is a website with all kinds of resources for ways that you can help the Black Lives Matter movement and the protesters who are still protesting in the streets of cities all over the United States and all over the world, protesting police brutality, protesting racism and white supremacy. And if none of those organizations are to your liking, I would encourage you, whether you contribute to this fundraiser. Oh, Joe McClory just contributed. Thank you, Joe. Just contributed to the Bail Project. And if none of these organizations are to your liking, if there's another organization that you would like to donate to, I would encourage you to do that. If there's a group that supports the Black Lives Matter movement or is supporting the protesters or is pushing for police reform or anything that is important in this moment in history as people are taking to the streets to protest inequality and abuse and police brutality and white supremacy and rising fascism and all of these awful things that we are dealing with at the moment. If there is a particular organization or group or fundraiser that is not linked in some way on this video that you feel like contributing to, I can only encourage you to please do that, because every little bit helps. If you can afford it and you are of a mind to, please contribute, whether it's to the Bail Project or Black Lives Matter DC or the NAACP or the Southern Poverty Law Center or your local Black Lives Matter group or some other local activist group in your area. Like, whatever you can give and whoever you can support in this very good fight, I would encourage you to do so. Thanks to everybody who has contributed to this one so far. I really appreciate it. I'm thrilled at how much we raised Monday night when I was raising money for it on Facepalm 5, and I'm thrilled by how much we've raised for this show so far today. I think it's awesome. Now back to the comic. So now we have our comic all set up, and it's time to add the dialogue. This is the fun part, right? So I go back to my script, and what is the dialogue in panel 1? The first line in panel 1 is Riker saying, "Yo, JP, captains can marry people, but can they divorce them too?" So I just copy it, and I move into my program, and I select my text tool, and I click on the layer, and I paste it in. And when I'm at this stage, I usually paste the text in with white text. It's going to be black text eventually, but at this stage when I'm assembling things, I make it white because it's just easier to work with. And let me see, I want to size that down. I usually make it about 25, 24 point size is I found a pretty good size, and I'll increase the magnification to 200. And then I decide how I want to arrange this text in the panel. And I think what I'll do is, I think I can do 2 rows with this. So let's try it like this. I would go, can marry people, comma, line break, but can they divorce them too? Then I'll change the justification from right justified to center. And I might add some boldface in here for emphasis, like captains can marry people, but can they divorce them too? And I'll put it up in the panel where I think it should go. Let's try it right there. I might have to move it. And then Picard responds, "Why do you ask?" Try that. That looks good. And Picard's answer, let me try this. Let me move Riker's first line a little higher so I can put Picard's response down here. Maybe let me put Picard's response on 2 lines instead of 3. We'll emphasize ask. Then Riker has another line, which I'm going to put down at the bottom, which is because DIVORCE spells relief, and I want some. Trouble in the Riker-Troy marriage. There's some trouble in the Riker-Troy marriage. Let me try and make sure I right justify it, so when I do my line breaks, it doesn't go all over the place on me. Okay, I think I can do that in 2 lines. Of course, I will emphasize DIVORCE and relief. Put that down there at the bottom. So now you can see I have my text placed roughly where I think it's going to go. You can still see the characters, but the text also has plenty of room to breathe. So now that's the text just sort of blocked out in panel 1. And then we just keep going on the process in panel 2. Panel 2's first line is Troy saying, "My apologies, Captain. Ignore him. He's overreacting." We'll put that in. Let me see how much more I have in this. Yeah, there's another line from Riker, and that's it. So I think I can break these lines of Troy's up into multiple balloons just to help it read a little better and to give you more of a sense of the rhythm of her speech that I want to convey. So I'll copy that and move that into a separate balloon, or a separate line that will eventually be a separate balloon. And I think I'll leave that as a single line. Move that up here, and then I'll make this 2 lines, and it'll be ignore him, he's overreacting. And I'll boldface overreacting. And I'll put that one right here between them. So this one up here will be one balloon, and this one down here will be another balloon. And we'll get there. You'll see what it's going to look like by the time it's done. Then Riker's line: "How am I overreacting when you verbally assaulted me to my face?" Trouble in paradise. Break that into 3 lines. Yeah, that looks pretty good. A lot of it is just eyeballing it. You want to see, you want the text to be arranged in a way that is visually interesting and visually pleasing, and that sort of leads the reader's eye to read it the way you want them to read it. I'll boldface a lot of this because Riker is very, very angry. So, how am I overreacting when you verbally assaulted me to my face? Right? It tells you how you want the reader to read it, and I'll put that down in the corner as well. Next, we move on to Picard's panel, and what does Picard say? Picard, being a good captain, being a good friend, obviously would prefer to have absolutely nothing to do with any of this. But, because these are his people, he says, "Perhaps if you told me what happened..." And that'll just go right there. Then we move on to the last panel in the row, and here's where we find out what all this is about. First, Troy says, "I called him a fuckboy." That's what this is all about. Leto Anor, if you're watching, Deanna Troi has called her husband, Commander Riker, a fuckboy. I'll probably have to rearrange these a little bit because there's a lot of text and multiple people sort of speaking over each other. So I'll just put this one up here for now. And just start adding the rest of it. So after she says that, Riker says, "She admits it." I think I might be able to. Let me see if this looks all right with a three line balloon here. So Troy says, I called him a fuckboy. Put that over here. Riker comes back with, she admits it. Picard says, and this is grounds for divorce? I can put that right here. And I think what I'm going to have to do, because there's so much dialogue, I'm going to have to sort of chain it together. So I'll just sort of put it here for now. And then, because after that, Riker responds with, if it's not, what is? When someone calls you a fuckboy, they're saying that you're a chump, a punk, a weak-ass dude who ain't shit. This is a lot of dialogue. I think I'm going to have to cheat a little bit and make this a little bit smaller so I can fit it in the space I have in the panel. Luckily, you can shrink the font size a bit and not really lose a whole lot of legibility unless you make it like super small. And I can, here we go, can decrease the space between the lines as well. There we go. So I can fit it in that corner up above Riker's hand. And then Deanna has some dialogue that I think I'm going to try to fit down in this bottom corner. So this will be a very dialogue-heavy panel, as you can see. But I think we'll be all right. Put Deanna's sigh in its own bubble. I might actually be able to fit it up here. Maybe make it a little smaller. I'll boldface it and italicize it and shrink it down a little. Because it's just one of those like long-suffering sort of sighs like that. So I can put it maybe right there. And then the balance of her dialogue will be down here. That's a lot of words. And Deanna's line there, if you can't read it, is she sighs and she says, Will, I've tried to explain that's fuckboy in the original sense as first heard in early 21st century hip-hop. You only assumed that's how I meant it. Let me move Picard's line over a little bit. Move Deanna's dialogue up. And let me see if I can shave a couple of lines off of this. And I think I can cram it down in that corner. Let me shrink it. And rearrange it a little. see where we're at here. So I got everything. Everything fits relatively neatly. The only problem is it might be a little confusing when people are reading the comic. It might not be immediately clear what order you're supposed to read everything in, and that is sometimes a problem. And that's a problem with with poorly laid out comic book art in general, which I'm afraid this at times may be an example of. But the nice thing is you can still understand what is happening in this scene, whether you read everything in my intended order or not. The intended order of the dialogue is Troy saying, "I called him a fuckboy," Riker saying, "She admits it," Picard saying, "And this is grounds for divorce," and Riker saying, "When you call someone a fuckboy, you're saying that they're a chump, a punk, a weak-ass dude who ain't shit," and then finally Deanna trying to explain. But if you read it a little bit out of order, I think you can still get the gist of what the meaning of the scene is. So I'm just going to go for this because I think this is probably the best arrangement. We'll move down to row 2. And this is, of course, remember Troy said, "You just assume that I meant it in the original hip-hop sense." And Riker's response to that is, "Of course I assumed that's what it meant. I'm an OG." Because this Riker is very problematic. I mean, the the real Riker is problematic in certain ways as well. But my Riker is a little problematic intentionally because him being kind of an ass is part of what makes him funny. And then this next panel has a bit of dialogue as well because there's about 3 different things going on. That's another thing. That's you find when you write these and you want to try and keep the number of panels to a minimum and the dialogue to a minimum while still getting your point across, so it's easy to read. You find there are several points in the writing of the script and the sort of creation of the comic where you're like, okay, I'm just going to have to do everything in one panel, and this next panel I'm about to block out the text in is one of those where there are about 3 different things happening in this panel, and I think I've done it briefly enough, and I've left myself enough space that I can get it done. But we'll find out. So first, because Troy is the first one speaking, I want to have her dialogue over here, even though she's over here. I'm just going to stretch it over when I make the word balloon. But for now, put it here and move it back up to the normal size. And Deanna tells Will, "Please stop calling yourself that." Meaning, please stop calling yourself an OG. And then Worf responds, "You are not a member of the Order of Gorkon." There, as far as I know, in Star Trek canon, there is no Order of Gorkon, but that is what Worf thinks OG stands for. So we're going to go with that because it's funny. And put that up. Actually, I think I can maybe... Yeah, that's probably as good as that's going to look. And Worf says, "You are not a member of the Order of Gorkin." And I arrange it so that horizontally, this word balloon will come after Troy's. So hopefully it will suggest that this is what you're supposed to read next. And then, oop, drag the wrong layer. And then after that, further over will be Geordi's response to Worf, which is not what that means. Okay, now to Troy's panel, where again she's trying to explain what she means by fuckboy. She says, "As I tried to explain, fuckboy, now spelled with an I, can also mean a man who frequently engages in casual sex. That'll make things better. That'll calm Riker right down, won't it?" Okay. Now what I want to do with this is make sure that the text does not cover Deanna's head. So I'm going to, and I have a lot of space. I don't mind putting the text over the foregrounded head of Commander Riker here, as long as I leave enough of it open that you can get a sense of the shot. So I place it here, and I see that the casual kind of covers her head. So I can rearrange it and put casual on its own line. Maybe I could do it that way and have casual sex be its own line. You can see it's still kind of covers her head, but I can space it over, and I think that'll be all right. And we'll see how it looks when I get into putting the word balloons in, but I think that'll do. And then the last panel in the row, another one with a lot of dialogue. And this one is going to be interesting because I'll have to show you a couple of different ways that I do this when it comes time to doing the word balloons, because there's a character that interrupts, Deanna interrupts him at one point here. And that is indicated not only by a dash at the end of the interrupted line, but also by a word balloon overlapping another one. So Riker's saying, you're accusing me of cheating on you? That's fucked up, Dina. Because one of the running jokes of the comic that I also forgot to mention is that Riker can never remember his wife's name. He calls her everything but Deanna. So he calls her Dina, and then she's going to interrupt him by saying, Deanna. I'll place it so that when I do the word balloons, it'll be roughly in the right place. Then Riker will continue over on the other side. He'll be saying, I haven't cheated on you since we've been married, not once, except for that time on Risa when I thought we had an understanding. This is also going to have to be one that I sort of cheat up a little bit. Let me see here. That'll be all right. As long as I get it above her head, I can move it over here. And then Deanna responds with, I know I was only teasing you. You have to admit you used to have a reputation as a bit of a womanizer. And that's still not the last text in this in this one. So let me see here. And then Riker finally finishes off the dialogue in this panel with an incredulous and utterly flabbergasted, I did? Put that one way over here. Okay, and I think I know how I'm going to do that, but we'll see how it works out. Yeah, I thought I accidentally dragged that layer a little bit. So then Riker turns to Captain Picard in the first panel of the final row. He's just learned to his shock and horror from his wife that apparently he had a reputation on the Enterprise as being a bit of a womanizer, a bit of a fuckboy. And he turns to his confidant, his mentor, Captain Picard, and he says, "Is that true?" And Captain Picard's response is to laugh in his face. Because how could you not? How could you be Commander Riker and not know that you have a reputation as a little bit of a womanizer? So first we put in a comic pause in the form of an ellipsis for Picard as he considers how he is going to respond to this. And then his uncontrollable laughter. I believe I will split this up into 2 lines here. Yeah. So it'll go between them. Maybe I can even put it down here. What about that? What if I put the "is this true" over here, put the ellipsis over here, sort of a pregnant pause, and then I can put the laughter dialogue down here. And then we come to 10 forward. Let me save this. I haven't saved it for a while. Now, we can tell by looking at the background that we're in a different setting and the characters are different. But I also want to add another indication just to make sure that we all get the point that we're in a different setting. So I'm going to add a caption. There we go. To this panel. I'm going to get my blue color back. And here's how I'm going to do the caption. Make a new layer. Put it underneath the layer that has the panel border. And I believe I just have it written as the caption just says later. Yeah, so makes sense. Later, colon. Make it a little bigger than the dialogue, make it bold. Put it up here in the corner. Then select my new layer that I just made. Select around it. I will fill it with that color, and then I will invert it. I might adjust the color a little bit too. I don't know if that looks quite the way I want it to look. Make the selection into a path. Stroke the path just like I did before. I'll move it a little so it's right in line with my border. Let me try just a drop shadow, see if that makes it look all right. Yeah, it looks pretty good. I still might mess with that color a little bit. Maybe about like that. I don't know, it looks a little bright. Maybe that does look better. No, whatever. So now Riker and Kirk are in 10 forward. We've got the caption added. Let me go ahead and let me see. Yeah. Okay. Merge that down. Merge that down. So now it's all one layer. Now, Riker's first line is he's filling Kirk in on the situation, and he says, "So I decided not to get a divorce, but I'm still pretty sore about it. The old, as you know, joined in progress. Where would sitcoms be without? Where would televised drama in general be without these conversational shortcuts that we hardly ever actually say in real life, but that just let the audience know what's going on." And then Kirk's response is, "If I were you, I'd enjoy it while it lasts." Kirk has a somewhat melancholy view of this. You will soon be discovering. Because remember I said that the explanation for this Kirk being on the Enterprise is that he is a transporter duplicate of the Kirk who went on to live the rest of his life in the 23rd century after Star Trek, the original series. Well, our Kirk has looked himself up, and he says to Riker, "I looked up the version of myself that remained in the 23rd century. By the time I got to be your age, I was an admiral with bad hair, a swollen gut, and a cold, empty bed. That's my future." So Kirk he's a little contemplative when Riker is showing up in 10 forward complaining about being called a fuckboy. And just as I did with Deanna in the earlier panel, I'm going to arrange this text so that it takes up the space in the panel next to Kirk's head without actually going across his head. And I think I'll make that a separate balloon. Okay, and I will center it, put it up here, let me see. And then I just space it appropriately so that it's missing my man's head. Again, try to arrange it so that it looks somewhat neat, somewhat attractive. I think I can make that a two-liner there. There. And now the final panel, the punchline, what you've all been waiting for. Kirk says, continuing his soliloquy, "Who deserves more pity? The fuckboy or the fuckboy who fucks no more?" Philosophical, you know. Can you, I don't know if the microphone can pick it up. There are a bunch of people right outside my window who are I assume I have the shade pulled down, but I assume that they're outside because they've gone to the ice cream shop down the street. They're getting their COVID ice cream. So, you know, there's still a pandemic, and they're not outside because they're protesting any great injustice. They're outside because they just wanted, because the ice cream shop is open again, and they wanted to get some COVID ice cream. They thought it would be worth it to risk spreading COVID around some more to get some ice cream. So we're doomed. We're just doomed is what we are. I mean, hey, honey, there's still a pandemic. You want to go outside and get some ice cream? I guarantee you nobody's wearing a mask out there either, by the way. I guarantee you there are no face masks. Let's get some COVID ice cream. What do you say? I mean, sure, we could just go to the grocery store and buy a pint of ice cream or a quart of ice cream or really any amount of ice cream that we want and take it back to the relative safety of our home and eat as much ice cream as we feel like. But no, let's not do that. Let's risk infection or spreading infection to others by going out to an ice cream shop in the middle of a pandemic and let's get some COVID ice cream. What do you say? What do you say, kids? Bring everybody. Expose the whole family. What do you say? Huh? Anyway, the next line is Riker's, and he's trying to give Kirk some advice here. And after Kirk has given finished off his speech when he says, "Who deserves more pity, the fuckboy or the fuckboy who fucks no more?" Riker says, "If you're that bummed out about it, you can always just get your jollies on the holodeck." There we go. Try that one. me see here. I think I might have to squeeze this down into the space between, yeah, I do have to do that. Between Kirk and LaForge here. If you're that bummed out, you can always just get your jollies on the holodeck. Pretty sure I just heard somebody sneeze outside, by the way. I told you, I'm telling you, it's COVID ice cream. They're going out, they're risking their lives and the lives of their fellow people just to get some fucking ice cream. And it's not even, it's like, it's Turkey Hill ice cream. It's ice cream you can literally go to the grocery store and get the exact ice cream that these people are eating. Okay. I think I'll make the text a little smaller too, just to make this easier. Keep dragging the wrong layer. There we go. And now for the punchline. Riker says, well, first, Riker says you should try the holodeck, and Kirk says, I think it's broken no matter what I ask for. It keeps showing me a hologram of this woman who designs warp engines. I think you can all see this coming. Why else is Geordi here? And then Geordi comes in with the punchline. I am not seeing the problem. Put that down there toward the bottom. I wonder, actually, if I could split this into two balloons, and that might not be easier. Let me try that. Try it that way. Shrink my text a little bit. Now what I'll do here is I'll make this Kirk's first line in response its own balloon, and I'll put it down here, and then that will connect to this one. All right, I think that is good for blocking the text. I'm going to zoom out and get ready for the next step in the process. But first, let me check in with you all on the live chat and see what's going on. Hi, everybody. Oh, I got some more. Oh, I got some more donations. I need to acknowledge. Thanks everybody for continuing to donate while I've been droning on and doing this comic thing. Let me see. The last one I acknowledged, I believe, was Joe. So Wooga donated. Thank you, Wooga. Got another anonymous one. Thank you, anonymous. Jonathan Peden. Thank you, Jonathan. Two more anonymous ones after that. Thank you to all of the anonymous donors. Brenderus, thank you, Brenderus. Matt Mountain, thank you, Matt. John Gingras, thank you, John. And Flint Reed, thank you, Flint. Thanks to everybody who is contributing to support the Bail Project during this fundraiser. I really super, super appreciate it. I cannot tell you how much. Let me see what's... I'm out of sync? All right, let me... Let me back out and come back in and see if that fixes the sync problem. Sometimes it does sort of fall out of sync a little bit. So let me go out and come back in. So don't anybody go anywhere. I'll be right back, and then I'll talk to you in the chat for a little bit, and then we'll come back and finish up this comic. What do you say? Be right back. Okay, hopefully this is a little better. If not, I'm not sure what I can do about it, but I know sometimes it falls out of sync a little bit. I think what I need to really do is experiment with putting in a little audio delay in my microphone so that the audio and the video don't naturally fall out of sync. I know a lot of people who deal with slightly out of sync audio and video in live streams have done that, where they just build in a little delay for the audio so that it doesn't but I haven't had a chance to actually experiment with that and figure out what my delay should be. So I apologize, and thank you all for bearing with me if my audio is a little bit out of sync with my video. I appreciate it. Oh, John, thank you for saying you love the comics. I appreciate it. Oh, I got another donation for the Bail Project from Matthew Vittorino. Thank you very much, Matthew. I really super appreciate it. Yes. Wise Brat says Steve is actually outside getting ice cream. This is a recording. Yeah, no, that's no. Aurora, what am I going to do with the comic once I'm done? I post them. I share them all over my social media. I share them in the community feed of my YouTube page. I share them on Twitter and on Facebook and on my Instagram. And actually, there's a link in the description of this video. I've gathered all of them, all of the ones that I've done in an Imager album. And if you want to click on that link in the description, you can go and you can read all of them. This one that I'm working on right now is number 41, and I've released 38 of them. And this is number 41. So this one won't actually be released outside of this stream. This one won't actually be published on my social media for probably a couple more days because I've made them a little bit ahead. But have I ever thought about hosting them on an actual comic site? No, not really. I'd have to look into what comic sites there are that I could host them on. But yeah, so to answer Aurora's question, yeah, I after I finish it, I will post it all across my social media, and it will also be archived in that Imager album along with the rest of them. So there's like a centralized place for people to look at them. But yeah, that's what I do with them, and it's a lot of fun. All right, and okay, cool. So it looks like I have been resynced. Thank you for letting me know. That's good. All right, let's go back into the screen share. And I'll show you how I finish off these comics, because believe it or not, we are almost done. Okay, so now we've got all the dialogue blocked out. Now it's time to make the word balloons. And we do that by, we'll zoom in again. And I've found that the shape of the word balloons that I like the best, I've experimented with different ones, different shapes, and I actually think that the word balloons that are rectangles with rounded corners work the best for this comic. I think they look the best, and they're the easiest to sort of arrange efficiently in the panel. So here's how I do that with my GIMP photo editor. You draw a rectangular selection around the text, and then it actually has a rounded rectangle tool under the select menu, and you just click that and it rounds the rectangle for you. And then what I do is I fill it with a black background color. And you can all probably guess what one of the final steps is going to be in these word balloons. Right now it's white text on a black background. Eventually it will be black text on a white background, but I think you can probably guess how I'm going to get there. But you just draw rectangles, selections around the text, and round the rectangle and fill in with the black background. And this part usually goes pretty quick because you can use shortcut keys, Control F for the rounded rectangle, Control period for the filling it with the black background. You know, this is one of those things, making these comics. It started just on a whim. It started as just, I had a funny idea for one, and I started getting these Star Trek, these 9-inch dolls, And I thought, what would be a fun thing that I could do with them? And it started as just a whim. And the first several comics, if you go back, uh, if you click on that Imager link, go to the album, and you go back and look at some of the earlier ones, you can tell that they were shot with my cell phone camera, and my cell phone camera is not the highest quality. So the comics, the pictures themselves are not of the highest photographic quality necessarily. And originally that was part of the point. It was meant as something I could just do quickly. I could set up the action figures and take the pictures really quickly. Wouldn't have to spend a whole lot of time setting up lights or doing anything like that. And then gradually, inevitably, really, it it turned into something where I was like, oh, but what if I tried to do this and make it really good? And of course, once you make that decision, then doing it and making it like an easy, simple thing that you can just knock off in a couple of minutes goes out the window. And then it becomes something where, oh, maybe I'll use my proper camera to do it, and I'll put up really good lighting for it, and I'll try to actually make this goofy action figure comic that started as a lark into something really good that actually takes time and effort to do. And here we are. Here we are making, and hopefully making good use of the effort for this one at least. We're raising some money for a good cause. But yeah, it started out as just something frivolous, just something to do to kill time if I was in between projects or I just wanted to do something funny. And now here we are. I've been working on this particular comic, not counting the scripting and the taking of the pictures, for what are we at here? Close to 2 hours, right? Uh, yeah, we've been going for it's been close to 2 hours now. So yeah, but hey, it's fun. Hopefully, it's fun for me to do. Hopefully, it's fun for you to watch, or at least it's an excuse for you all to have fun talking to each other in the live chat while I'm doing this. And we're raising money for a good cause. So once again, if you haven't donated yet and you are able to, I would certainly encourage you to donate to the fundraiser for the Bail Project, or to look in the description box of the video. There's a link also to the GoFundMe for the Black Lives Matter DC Legal Defense Fund. That is also a great cause that I'm asking people to donate to. Or if there's another cause, another organization that you know of that is supporting the protesters or supporting efforts to push for police reform or to fight white supremacy, please, I encourage you to donate to that, whatever it is. There are lots of great organizations that I've donated to in the past. The NAACP, the ACLU, which is not a perfect organization, but has done some good work. The Southern Poverty Law Center is one of my favorites. The Southern Poverty Law Center is actually the organization that was mostly responsible for smashing the Ku Klux Klan in the 1980s. And they did that by almost suing them out of existence. So I will always be a great admirer of the Southern Poverty Law Center, because they were the organization that in the 1980s damn near sued the KKK out of existence. So in terms of national civil rights organizations or national activist organizations, they will always be very, very, they'll always be tops in my book. I'll put it that way. Okay, now for this bit here where she interrupts him, I'm going to show you what I'm going to do here, because I'm going to have to do this in the part where she interrupts him is going to have to be on a separate layer, because it's going to have to be above the other one. So I'm going to do that bit last. First, I'll do these other bits that are in the panel. Okay, and now I will, yeah, see, that's all in one layer. I'll make another layer that will be above this layer, and that is where I will do the balloons for Troy's dialogue in this, so it can actually be above Riker's dialogue. And I'll just do it for, because I'm going to connect these word balloons. So I'll just put them both on the same layer. All right, now I need to make sure to go back to the lower layer for the rest of the dialogue, because that's the only time I'm going to use that layer, I believe. And you might remember, if you were paying attention, you might remember me being careful not to have the text cross over the faces of the characters, but you might also notice that there are a few times where I've allowed the word balloon to cover the faces of the characters. I'm going to take care of that in one of the last steps of finishing the comic. So for now, that's okay. I think I'm going to have to rearrange Geordi's dialogue here a little bit to make it a little narrower so it doesn't butt up against the edge of Kirk's ballooner. So instead of 2 lines, I'll make it 3 lines. Move it over here and then do it that way. And I think that'll get me what I need. There we go. So now the balloons are roughed out. You can kind of see this whole process, excuse me, of now that I've done that, let me take another sip of soda. You can tell that this whole process is just roughing things out and then gradually refining them step after step after step. So now that we've got the word balloons roughed out, it's time to put the arrows directing the word balloons at the characters who are talking. So, for instance, in the first panel here, Yo JP, captains can marry people, but can they divorce them too? That's Riker's line. So I'm going to use my path tool and draw a path from this corner of the balloon down toward Riker and put a little curve into it. Make a selection from the path. Fill it with a background color to match the rest of the balloon, and there's arrow number 1. This one goes to Picard. Selection from path, fill with background, there you go. Now I could try to connect these two balloons because this is also Riker's line, but because of the way they're placed in the panel, it's easier to just add a second arrow pointing to Riker. So that is what I'm going to do. And actually I'm just going to make this one a straight one. Pointing up sort of from this side. And a lot of the times, you know, if you're wondering, like, how do you decide when to do a curved arrow or a straight one, it's all arbitrary. It's all, like, stylistic. Sometimes it's necessitated by the placement of the word balloon relative to the character speaking, as it's going to be in this next one. But a lot of times it's just whatever looks good to you. You know, it's a very subjective thing. So now, because the first line of dialogue is Deanna's, and it is over here on the left, but she is on the right, the word balloon is going to have to stretch over to her. And also I want to curve it so that the tip is pointing at her instead of pointing as though it's pointing past her. So I'll put a little bit of a curve in it. And I think that's pretty good. Yeah, that'll work. Or actually, you know what? Instead of doing that, let me undo that. Instead of doing that, it's probably a lot more elegant, because these are both Deanna's lines, and I didn't realize that until I... So instead of doing that, what I just did with the curvy arrow, I'm just going to connect the top one to the bottom one, like that. And then I can put her arrow down here, because these are both Deanna speaking. That's going to look a lot better. And read a lot more natural. Yeah. That looks a lot better. And then Riker's line coming from over here. Again, we can just do a straight one. And then these, I can also do a, I'm going to connect it because, actually this is going to be tough. I'm not sure. I didn't think this ahead, did I? Let me see. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to switch this from Troy's line to Riker's line. So instead of Troy saying, I called him a fuckboy, this is going to be Riker saying, she called me a fuckboy. I'm going to get rid of Riker's line, she admits it, because we don't need that anymore. Shrink it a little so that it'll still fit in the same word balloon, maybe. There. And I can get rid of she admits it. I can get rid of this word balloon. See, these are some of the adjustments that you can make when you screw up in ways that you don't realize until it's too late to really do anything about it, other than figure it out on the fly. So this was Deanna's line. Now it is Will's line. And instead of her saying that she called him a fuckboy, and I'm going to change that to a Y, because that is the version of the word that he thinks that she is calling him. It'll be Will accusing her. And I'll just connect it. There we go. All right. I like that. I think that works a little better. And then as far as the arrow, I think I can squeeze a little one in right here. Just pointing at Riker's head, and that will do the job. Yeah. Then Picard's can be right here. And Deanna's is right here. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, I realized as I was looking at that panel, how the hell am I going to indicate that this was Deanna's line when all this other shit is in the way? So you adjust. You change it from Deanna's line to Riker's line. Still conveys the same information, sets up the fuckboy thing. And now we can move on. Now, this is a nice, easy one. Now here's one where I'm going to have to stretch. Go ahead and fill that in. See how that looks. Yeah, acceptable. It's a little thick in the middle, but I think it'll be all right. And then Worf's line can come from right there. Geordie's line from right here, and it'll have to curve so it can get around Worf's word balloon. But that's okay. You can just push it up here. And back this way so that it there we go. Cat just burst into the room. What do you want? All right. She just wanted to see what was going on, I guess. Ah, why did I do that? There we go. And yeah, I think that'll work for Geordie's. Let me just see. Yeah, that'll work. Actually, I can just string all three of these Riker balloons together. It's probably the easiest way to do that. Now for Deanna's word balloons, because this needs to cut him off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this one here and float it to a new layer temporarily, just so I can move it so that it will cover this this text. And then I'll move the word in the middle of it. And then let me see. Yeah, I'll move it back and see. Yeah. Wonder if I can stretch it around their hands. Yeah. There we go. I don't know. I think that'll be all right. And then one of these. All right. I think that's it for that incredibly complex panel. Almost. I need to rearrange some text layers a little bit so that this will actually go over that line, but I think I got it. Just one more row. and you probably can't hear her over the microphone. Lucky you, but the cat, it's getting close. It's actually, it's not close to the cat's feeding time, but it's close to when the cat would like her feeding time to be. So she is currently prowling the hallways outside this room, yowling and complaining, hoping that either I or my wife will take pity on her and will feed her. And whether that happens before the end of this live stream or not is yet to be seen. Okay. Now the last few panels. We get Riker's here. Okay. Now with Kirk, because it covers his face, what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase these parts of it that are covering his face and body. So I need to have the word balloon, or the arrow rather, anchor at a part of the word balloon that will not be erased. Hello, Audikens. What do you want? Yeah, she's just being contrary. So I will start it right here, and I'll drag it out to here. And then what I think I'll do is, yeah, take down the transparency a little bit so I can see what it'll look like and where it'll be, to make sure that it does look like it's actually pointing at Kirk. That'll do. There we go. That should work all right. It'll look how it's supposed to look when I'm finished with it. Now look at this. I didn't notice this before. I'm gonna have to just fill this in. No problem. Actually, that is a problem, because it doesn't cover it doesn't cover all of the text. I'm gonna have to do that bit over again. Let me cut that out. I think what happened was I didn't have it high enough. So let me try it again with this one. Yeah, I think what happened is when I selected it the first time, I didn't have it high up enough, and when it rounded off the rectangle, it rounded too much off, and yeah, see, it just did it again. Let me move it up a little higher. Move it out a little bit. Now let's try it. There we go, much better. Okay. I connect these two. And I'll have this one pointing up like that. And I think that'll do it for that. I think that'll be all right. Let me see. Yeah, I think that'll be all right. And almost done. I think I've texted myself into a corner again here. Can you see? This is Captain Kirk's line, and it needs to get down to Captain Kirk's face. And it can't get through because of these two here. So I'm going to have to do some rearranging here as well. What if I move this over? Yeah, okay. How about I do that? I'm going to have to do another overlap, I think. Like I'm doing with Troy's dialogue up a little bit higher. Let me see. First I'll do this. And then I'll do this to connect these two. I'll do this to connect these two. Now have the arrow coming out of this one. Fill that in. And go ahead and put in Geordie's arrow, because he is not seeing the problem. So I think what I'll do is add another layer. I'll put that one under this one. And I'll move this down to that layer. And I'll put the arrow pointing down to Kirk, and it will go underneath this bridge. Yeah. We'll see how that works. It's more complicated than I thought it would be, but there's a you know, as I said, one of the problems is there's a lot of words and there's minimal space to fit all the words in. So okay, here's what we're gonna do. First, we will finish the main layer, which is where most of the text is. And how I'm going to do that is, I've got all the word balloons blocked out. So now I just need to select for color on all of them, and it'll select everything on that layer. Actually, I do. I think yeah, I screwed up. I knew I did. Hang on. Yeah. Okay, so I need to move these arrows got onto Counselor Troy's lair somehow. So I need to float those. And move them down to this layer. There we go. So now we select all of the black in that layer, and then I'm going to go from selection to path, because that gives you a smoother line when you stroke when you use the stroke tool to create a line. Stroke path, and I found that a 2-pixel line is the best to outline the word balloons. And there you go. There's for that layer. Here's for the layer for Deanna's lines that talk over wills, and then here's for Captain Kirk's layer that goes underneath. Okay. And that actually looks right. That looks about how I want it to look. You can tell that he's sort of talking behind Riker. That Riker is talking after him because he's talking over him. Now, as for Deanna, I think I can actually afford, because it's just this in this layer, I can afford to move this up a little bit, and it'll still look right. And I just need to drag the text up as well. No. There we go. Yeah, and it still looks right. And then it'll cover that more, because what I'm going to do is let's see, where is this? That's up here. So you're accusing me. So I need to drag this layer up above that layer. So that it looks right. See? Now it looks like she's cutting him off. Yeah. There we go. No, I think that's about right. I think that's about where everything needs to be. Let me zoom out. It'll be reasonably clear who is talking, in what order, and to whom. So now that all the dialogue is more or less where it needs to be, I'm going to change the visibility. I'm going to make all the other layers invisible, except for the layers that have the word balloons. And then I'm going to go up to the top layer and click New from Visible, and that will make a new layer. As the name would suggest, it will make a completely new layer that is just like a single layer copy of everything that was visible in the field of the image at that point. And then I make visible again my other layers. This is my frame layer, and I put that on top. And I drag my layer with all the pictures, the panels, and I put that underneath. And I don't really need to do this part usually, but I like to drag the background up as well. So I leave all of this, all of the individual text there just in case I need it to correct a mistake or something, but usually I don't need it. So now all of the word balloons and the dialogue are now all in a single layer, right like that. So now I can do a color inversion, and now everything is the right color. Now the text is black and the balloons are white. And now I do the same thing with this that I did when I was doing my page layout about 100 years ago, if you remember. I do a select all to select the entire layer. I shrink that by 20 pixels, and I do a crop to selection, and that cleans up the edges, around the edges of the panels. And then I just want to zoom in about 200% and go in between the gutters to make sure that, to make sure that there are no word balloons sticking out that I don't want. Sometimes you do want to have an overlap. Sometimes intentionally I will leave, I'll have one balloon sort of wrapping over, crossing a gutter and crossing over into the next panel. I don't have any of that in this one, so I want the gutters to be completely empty. So if there's any point where the word balloon kind of spills out, I want to make sure to nip that, to trim that up. I think I got all of them here. Yeah, this is one. Need to get rid of this. And here. I think that's all of the vertical ones. Now horizontally, it's easy because I just need to do 2. Just drag it across. Control X, drag it down to the next one. Control X, and there we go. We're almost done. I'm just going to go through and some of my final little cleanup steps before I get to the real final step. Is sometimes I like to check and make sure that the corners are clean. What I mean by that, if you can see a little bit of the line for the curve and it's right like that close to a corner, I like to go ahead and just use the selection tool and fill it in with white so it's just a nice sharp corner. I just think it looks better that way if it's that close to the corner anyway. Here's another little one down here. I think this one is big enough I can leave it. I don't think that'll be too distracting. This one's just a little tiny one here. This one here I think I'll get rid of. Again, it's as I've said before, it's very arbitrary. It's very much what do you think looks right, you know, as the author, as the person making the comic, what looks right to you, what can you live with and what can't you live with, you know. Like with this one here, I think what I might do with this is I might actually move this whole balloon over just a little bit, and so that it goes behind the caption box. And what I'm going to do with the way I'm going to do that is select it with the freehand tool, float it into its own layer, and then I can just drag it over until the line is behind. See? And it's still pointing it at Riker. And then I can merge it down to where it belongs. And then I can take my selection tool and just select the area that's visible there. Oops, there we go. Fill it in. Now I think that looks a little better. It looks a little sharper, I think. It's a little tiny one here. That one looks good. And I think the rest of them look good. Now, the final stage before the whole thing is done is I need to cut out the areas of the word balloons like this here that cover the faces of the characters, because I like to have those, I like to have the faces of the characters completely visible. So I zoom in really far, 800%, and I use the freehand select tool, and I dial back the transparency of the layer that has all the text and the balloons on it now to about 10%, so I can see through it and I can see where it overlaps with the heads and the faces of the characters. I select that area that I want to cut out with the freehand tool. And with this extreme magnification, it's really easy to do accurately. Then I feather it by 2.5 pixels. And again, this is just experimentation. I've just found that this works the best. And then I cut it out. And I go through all the panels. And I do that with every one. This is the final step to sort of clean it up, to get it looking as good as it can look. Select, feather, 2.5, Control X, and cut it out. This one doesn't cover Riker's face, but it does cover his hand, and I want to be able to see his hand because he is making a gesture. So I cut out the hand, same deal. Feather, cut. So we're getting close to the end here. Once I get these last little bits of the word balloons cleaned up, I think that'll be good. I think that'll be the end of this comic, and it'll be the end of the stream too, because it's close to dinner time for me, and I'm sure I know the cat is eager to eat, and my lovely wife is probably ready to eat dinner too. So after I get this bit done, I will sort of zoom out and let you see the finished product, and then if y'all have any final questions or comments or anything you want to talk about in the live chat, we can hang out in the live chat for a couple of minutes after the comic is done. And of course, I would greatly encourage anyone who hasn't donated yet to either to the Bail Project or also to Black Lives Matter DC, which is linked in the description of the video. If you were planning to, or if you're able to and you want to, I would encourage you to do so if you haven't yet, before the stream ends. Although, of course, if you're watching this after the live stream, you can continue to donate. You can still donate through the donate button. In the donation box underneath the video on the YouTube page. But yeah, any final donations that I see that I haven't acknowledged, I'll be happy to read out. And anybody who has any last questions or comments or anything at all, we can do that, and then we'll call it a day. Because I think I'm just about done here. I'm gonna zoom out one last time just to make sure. I know I got to cut out Kirk's shoulder and face here for this one, and I think this might be the last one that I need to do this cleanup for. There we go. No, I need to do this one too. This one has a lot of coverage on old Jimbo's face here. It's a little tedious at this stage. Like, it's time consuming to have to go through and do this, but I find that this technique really, it allows you to, again, as you've seen, if you've been watching the whole time or even most of the time, one of the great challenges of doing this, challenges. One of the annoying things about making these silly photo comics is finding space in in the panels for all the text that you've written. And in some cases, you have to actually just find ways of cutting back on the text, as I've had to do once or twice, as you've seen during this stream. But doing it this way, having the words sort of to the side of the head and the word balloon cut out so that it appears to be behind the head, one of the things that it allows you to do is to maximize the panel space, so you can still see the characters as much as possible, and the characters don't look crowded out by their own dialogue. But you also can take the maximum amount of space to fit all that dialogue in. It's one of the interesting things. One of the things I've always loved about comics is that it really is a marriage of the visual and the textual medium. You know, it's completely visual, but it's sort of a combination of the visual and of the literary. So you gotta find a way to fit the text in, fit the text in among the images, which are telling the story, but also do it in a way that is, if not visually pleasing, at least, I mean, ideally it would be visually pleasing, but if it can't be visually pleasing, it's at least not visually off-putting. It's at least visually acceptable. Because if you just wanted to read words on a page, you would read a book. The fun part about comics is that yes, there are words on the page, but there are also images that do most of the heavy lifting. Okay, I think we might call this one done. Let me see. Let me save here. Let me go through and see. I think I've got everything cut out that I wanted to cut out. I think everything makes sense. Everything looks good. Yeah, I think we're going to call this one done. Yeah. I like this. So, yeah, there we go. There's the finished comic. Let me zoom in to 100% here. Actually, I think I can full screen it here. Well, oh, there we go. So here's the finished comic. Yo, JP, captains can marry people, but can they divorce them too? Picard says, why do you ask? Riker says, because DIVORCE spells relief, and I want some. Troy says, my apologies, Captain. Ignore him. He's overreacting, to which Riker responds, how am I overreacting when you verbally assaulted me to my face? Picard says, perhaps if you told me what happened? Riker explains, she called me a fuckboy. And Picard says, and this is grounds for divorce? Riker says, if it's not, what is? When someone calls you a fuckboy, they're saying that you're a chump, a punk, a weak-ass dude who ain't shit. Troy says, Will, I've tried to explain, that's fuckboy in the original sense, as first heard in early 21st century hip-hop. You only assumed that's how I meant it. Riker says, of course I assumed that's what it meant. I'm an OG. Troy says, please, stop calling yourself that. Worf says, you are not a member of the Order of Gorkon. Geordi says, not what that means. Troy says, as I tried to explain, fuckboy can also mean a man who frequently engages in casual sex. Riker says, so you're accusing me of cheating on you? That's fucked up, Deanna. I haven't cheated on you since we've been married. Not once, except for that time on Risa when I thought we had an understanding. Deanna says, I know, I was only teasing you. You have to admit you used to have a reputation as a bit of a womanizer. Riker says, I did? He turns to Picard. Is that true? Picard takes a pause and then... Later in 10 Forward, Riker says to Kirk, so I've decided not to get a divorce, but I'm still pretty sore about it. Kirk says, if I were you, I'd enjoy it while it lasts. And he goes on to say, I looked up the version of myself that remained in the 23rd century. By the time I got to be your age, I was an admiral with bad hair, a swollen gut, and a cold, empty bed. That's my future. Who deserves more pity? The fuckboy or the fuckboy who fucks no more? Riker says, if you're that bummed out about it, you can always just get your jollies on the holodeck. And Kirk says, I think it's broken. No matter what I ask for, it keeps showing me a hologram of this woman who designs warp engines. And Geordi, who is standing right there, says, I am not seeing the problem. And the human adventure continues. That is the finished comic, my friends. I will be posting it, as I said, I will be posting it to my social media pages in the next couple of days, probably, maybe next week, so you can see like the finished version in its proper context, in the way that it is meant to be seen, to be read. But that's it. That's it, and it only took what, almost 3 hours. It only took almost 3 hours for me to finish this comic. And again, that is not counting taking the pictures or setting up the lighting or any of that stuff. So yeah, that's the finished comic. Let me first let me check and see if there are any further donations that I have not acknowledged. I think the last one I acknowledged was Matthew Vitorino. Also Zaphod 2073. Thank you very much, Zaphod 2073. Sam Ferguson. Thank you, Sam. Stu Pot. Thank you, Stu. There was another anonymous donation. Thank you. Blurred Awakened. Thank you, Blurred Awakened. And then also John Burns. Thank you, John. Thank you, all of you, for your incredibly generous donations to support the Bail Project, which is helping out protesters who have been arrested in the recent protests following the murder of George Floyd, and helping people pay their legal expenses and make bail. And also to any of you who have donated to the Black Lives Matter DC fund, that is also linked in the description. Thank you to those of you who have made contributions to that as well. I really, really appreciate it. I'm going to check and see how much we have actually raised, because I wanted to do this. Let me go to my own page here. That is there we go. Wow. Okay, I'm going to show you guys something pretty cool. I made a note of the of how much we had made, of how much the fundraiser was at when this live stream started, because I told you that this fundraiser was started before this live stream. The fundraiser for the Bail Project was actually started by my fellow YouTuber Tyler Regan, and I sort of joined in, and we raised some money for this on Monday with the Facepalm 5, and then people continued to contribute. And then when this live stream began, before anybody in this live chat contributed a dime, today the amount raised was $2,687. Okay, the amount raised as of right now, after this 3-hour live stream. So basically, the amount contributed by you all is it now stands at $3,627. So we're about $60 short of an even $1,000. We have raised almost $1,000 more dollars for the Bail Project as a result of this live stream, as a result of you all being incredibly generous and wonderful, and watching me make this ridiculous this Star Trek parody photo comic. We have raised almost an additional $1,000 for the Bail Project. So wow, thank you all so much. I cannot express to you my gratitude. That is so awesome. Thank you all so much. All of you who have contributed or have shared this, invited other people in to watch. I am so happy that we've raised almost $1,000 extra dollars for the Bail Project in this live stream. And I'm gonna do this again on Friday for my Ask Away stream. We'll do the same deal. We'll make that a fundraiser for the Bail Project as well. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Thank you all so very much for helping me with this, for contributing with this. Let me take a last glance through the live chat, see if anybody has anything else they want to say or ask. Oh, Tom Simmons said about my editing, I guess. Did you consider using the pen tool? It's difficult at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's faster and cleaner. I have. I'm still sort of experimenting with it. Thank you for that. Thank you for that suggestion. I think I might try that because I'm continually sort of refining my method. Yeah, I think maybe with that I can sort of cut it out. I can erase it a little cleaner. I might try that. But yeah, thank you for that. Duralta Trek, he says, where did he get the digital pre-chroma key backgrounds from? Are they available on the internet, or did Steve Shives construct them or on the computer in order to reuse these sets? No, I've mentioned it a couple times already. I guess you weren't here earlier, but yeah, their backgrounds from a wide variety of places. Some of them are from screen grabs of episodes. Some of them are digital reconstructions of sets or of backgrounds, environments of the various shows and movies that people have made that you can download online. But yeah, they're two-dimensional images that are put up on my computer monitor, and then the action figures are placed in front of the computer monitor. So everything, the action figures and the background, that's all in camera. Like that's me photographing them in front of. It's kind of like a rear projection. I know I think somebody mentioned, made it, it's like analogous to a rear projection. It's kind of like a rear projection in a very, very cheap way. So they're photographed in front of the images. Oh, my audio is a little out of sync. Well, that's okay, John, because we're almost done. So sorry for the audio being a little out of sync, everybody. But we're going to wrap this up. So thanks to everybody once again for contributing. Thanks to everybody for watching. I hope you found this entertaining and educational. If you ever want to make your own webcomics, that's basically how I do it. You all may know a better way of doing it, but that's how I do it. This was fun. I had a lot of fun taking you through step by step from almost the beginning all the way through the end of a finished comic. Took about 3 hours. Hopefully you found it worth watching. Thank you all so very much for watching and for contributing. Watch for the finished comic that I just made to be posted on my social media in a couple of days. Check out the Imager link in the description to go back and look at all of the past comics that I've done. As I've said, making parody sort of fan art Star Trek comics has been a part of my Star Trek fandom for a very long time, and this is just sort of the most recent version of that. So I hope you all enjoy it. I hope you all think that they're fun. I like making them and like sharing them with you, and I appreciate it a lot. I appreciate you watching and contributing. Thank you all, and I will see you on Friday for Ask Away. So if you're a patron and you haven't asked a question, get into my Patreon page, patreon.com/Steve Shives, and all patrons can ask questions ahead of time for Ask Away. And Ask Away will be another will be another fundraiser. We'll keep raising money for the Bail Project because it's a super important, very necessary cause. Let's not forget the importance of what's happening in this country and around the world right now. The protesters who are out there agitating and being activists for Black lives and an end to white supremacy and police reform and an end to police brutality and an end to racism. It's so important. We all owe them so much, and we all owe them, if nothing else, our support in any way that we can provide it. So thank you all for doing your part to support that incredibly worthy, noble cause. I'm really, really happy with what we've done here today. I think I'm thrilled that we've raised like $1,000 more. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you later, everybody. Take care.